Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast, and I'm going to be doing a number of episodes myself. I want to talk a little bit about some experiences I have with investing. And I'm specifically going to talk about real estate investing because I spent 7 years as a real estate agent. And today I'm going to talk about the 5 mistakes people make with home buying, with condos, and then I'll talk about townhouses, and then I'll talk about houses. But I'll do the other 2 in a separate episode. So I just want to kind of talk about condos and how, and even if you're not buying a condo, to understand how it impacts the neighborhood, how it impacts the sellability of your real estate and as something that other people might rent versus your home or your townhouse or something like that. So the big 5, first I'm going to give you some examples of some purchases that I've made. I've bought 4 condos in my lifetime. Well, number 4 will be on Monday, and I'll talk about those. Then I'll talk about financing and how leverage works and doesn't work, and where you should, not where you should, but what decisions I made based on my situation at the time. The third thing I'll talk about is volatility and rentability. Condos are the most volatile of the 3, the big 3, the condo, the townhouse, and the home. And you'll find that out very quickly as you try to get a loan for one. 4 are the HOA fees. These are a necessary expense, and really understanding the HOA, the value that you're getting, but also how much you're going to end up spending, because it's not just that monthly. There's also other things that you might need, like paving the entire condo complex or something like that. And then there are certain condos that you can't rent. And you might go in thinking, okay, I'm going to rent this out after I leave, only to find out that you can't rent it at all because of certain restrictions with the HOA. And that HOA document is something that changes, because if the association decides to make a change, you may not be able to rent it later. And that's why when I bought my duplex, I wanted a duplex, or I wanted something that had no association. But this time I want one with an association, and I'll talk about why. So let's start with some examples. The very first home that I bought, I actually bought 5 condos, sorry. So the very first condo I bought was a beach condo. It was in Ocean City, and I bought it for my family because it was kind of a pain in the neck to my parents. And this is a fundamental principle of real estate that I think we kind of need to talk about. I understand buy and hold, that it's better to buy it and then hold it for a lifetime. But when I first got out of school, and I've been talking about this book called the Most Important Decade, or The Deciding Decade, that basically says your 20s are the most volatile time in your life. And as you're making a huge commitment to something like a home or a condo at that time, it's very difficult to get out of a home once you've bought it. If you've not been in it for a while, if you've not had time to get that mortgage down such that you would be able to sell it for a market rate or something like that. So the rule of thumb is that you probably need somewhere between 8 and 10% of the value of the home to move it. Now, there are some exceptions to this if you sold it yourself and things like that, but most people have to sell with a realtor, and a lot of times there's a good reason to do that. But just know that when you get into something, how volatile is your current situation. If you're thinking, I'm going to live here for the rest of my life, great. But if you're thinking, I'm just going to be here for a couple of years, that completely changes everything. I bought because I wanted to be in real estate, but I knew that my life was completely volatile. I had no idea where I was going to land. I was in Arizona for that first year, and I rented because I just didn't know where I wanted to go. But I still wanted to buy something, so I bought something in a place where I knew. I bought it at the beach where my parents had, or I bought their condo. And the reason that they didn't want it is that the expenses, getting a new air conditioner, getting a new HVAC, paying some HOA fees. It's only rentable really from June to August because it's a resort town. Over the winter, you just kind of winterize it so that we don't have to use the water, but the pipes don't freeze and things like that. So that first condo was an investment as something that I want to be in real estate. But that doesn't mean that my primary home should be something with a mortgage on it, because my life was just too volatile. I'm not saying that I didn't have job security and things like that. I'm just saying I didn't know what the future held for me. So moving on, I did end up buying after a year in Arizona. I decided I wanted to be there. I got a store, as it were. I was floating some, but then got a store, and I only worked 32 hours a week, so I was a little bit limited in how much I could buy. So looking at that, I decided to buy a one-bedroom. And looking back at it, I would never buy a one-bedroom home ever again. There's a couple reasons for this. First, if you only have one toilet, then if you rent it out, then anytime the toilet backs up, it's an emergency. And when you only have a one-bedroom, it makes it tougher on other people, because even if you have only one person, they still want to have that other room to kind of move around. They want to have places where they can put their things. And a one bedroom is something that's relatively, you can only charge a single person so much, or maybe a couple rents it. But and then another thing I did was I bought on the ground floor rather than the upper floor. And you would buy on the ground floor if you're in an area where maybe some people that are interested in a ranch or someplace like that, where maybe the elderly don't want to go up a flight of stairs or something like that. But what I made the mistake of was not going to see the place when the occupants from upstairs were there. So after I bought it, I found that the upstairs was very noisy. This is just from walking around. I could hear them walking anytime they went from the kitchen to the living room to the bedroom. And there just wasn't a lot of soundproofing between the upper and lower floor. And that was an easy thing to prevent. Because if I had known, I just need to go when somebody's upstairs, I could have made the appointment in the afternoon when they'd come home from work. I would have heard it, and then I would have known that wasn't such a good idea. So I ended up selling it. I took a little bit of a loss, but I learned from my mistake, and I bought a 2-bedroom in the exact same community, walking, just steps from that place. And this one was amazing. It was right over the pool. You could see the planes from Sky Harbor landing and coming up, and then we would get pizza and beer for the monsoons, because in Arizona it's just a really cool thing when you can see them. So I learned from that mistake. I took a little bit of a loss, and you'll hear over and over in real estate investing that the first time is always an experiment, and you're really trying to just be able to get out of it. So I'm trying to give you this advice ahead of time. So I move into the second place, and the second master wasn't really a bedroom at all. It had a closet, but barely. It was so tiny. And it would be very difficult for 2 people to live there, although there were times where I had a roommate. And looking back, it was great that it was literally right over the pool. But then when you think about that and you try to sleep, it was right over the pool. So when people are there at night, it was just really, really loud. So I did end up getting rid of that one because I ended up wanting to get something more like a house, something that had better cash flow, and it was just kind of a pain to work with something that was so far away. But that was the third condo I bought. The fourth condo happened right at the height of the real estate boom. So this is right before the bust. An apartment owner, they owned this apartment complex that was on the water in Baltimore. The views from it were absolutely beautiful. You could see Federal Hill. You could see the skyline. These homes were amazing. And I want to say that I tried to buy it. I think it was like $200,000 or $220,000 for a 1-bedroom. That if you looked out the window, you could see, the water, but you had to kind of lean over and see it. So it wasn't certainly one of the ones that was in the front. But what happened was that was just so unusual is that I wasn't allowed to buy it. I put in that I wanted to buy it, but they had to get all of the renters out and done with their leases before all of us could move in. And in that time, the appreciation was astronomical. I think it went up to 280,000 from 220 or something like that. And I never really wanted the condo in the first place. I wanted to buy a house. So I was like, wow, that went way up. Maybe I should just get rid of it. And that's what I did. I never lived in it. I left it. I think I sold it 45 days later. And come to find out, I hadn't looked at it for a very long time. And I saw that the value had actually gone down to like closer to 180, and it never recovered. So condos, which I'll talk about in a little bit, are the most volatile. And while you can have a condo that appreciates, you're going to find that in the down markets or in certain markets where people are moving towards townhouses and houses, that the condo is the one that's going to take the hit. And I'll show you how this manifests kind of as you're trying to buy one. And then the last one is my third home that I'm buying now is going to be a condo. It's in Tempe, in Arizona. And instead of a 2-bedroom, I've got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath that's actually not even half a mile from where I originally bought the first condos in Tempe. In those places, it's just a lot easier to rent a 3-bedroom, even if you're only renting to 2 people, because if you have 3-bedroom, then 3 people can say, oh, wow, let's say it's $1,200 a month for rent. Then 3 people are looking at $400 a month versus 2 people that are looking at $600 a month. And as a pharmacist now who makes what I do, I guess I just don't look at the difference between $400 and $600 as a lot of money. But there are many people who do look at that as a difference or a complete difference. And also the flexibility to have that 3rd bedroom, whether you want to use it for something else, to have 2 levels and things like that. And there are a lot of things that, kind of are nice about it. It's gated now, the community. And then, there are no dogs allowed, which means it's going to be relatively quiet. So I've kind of gone from, okay, I bought this beach place, which I can only rent from 3 months of the year, to a 1-bedroom where I can manage it directly, but unfortunately it's really loud because of the person on top. Then I went to the 2-bedroom that was right over the pool, and then I went to the 1-bedroom waterfront when I said I would never buy a 1-bedroom again. But that just made me nervous, and I ended up getting rid of it, and I got lucky. I dodged a $100,000 drop. And then the last one, the 5th one, was the one I'm buying now, which is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. That can rent for, a little over what I'm paying monthly after you figure the mortgage and the HOA fees. So I just want to kind of take you through over my 20 years what I went through, so that when you look at a condo and say, oh well, it would just be so much cheaper to get this 1-bedroom. But if you look at it and you look at 1-bedroom versus 2-bedroom versus 3-bedroom, you'll actually find that there's not a doubling and tripling. What I mean by that is if the 1-bedroom is $100,000, the 2-bedroom isn't $200,000, and the 3-bedroom $300,000. What it looks like more like is the 1-bedroom might be $100,000, the 2-bedroom is $120,000, and then the 3-bedroom would be like $150,000 or $160,000. And I know to Californians and New Yorkers, you're saying, how can you put a 1 in front of anything real estate? It's $300,000, $400,000. But I'm just letting you know that extra rooms are not that much more expensive, and the more rooms you can get, the better. So that's my first thing. Just give you some examples of some of the purchases that I've made that I had. Now, in terms of financing, I just ran into this just last week or last 2 weeks where I actually put 25% down rather than 20 because owner occupancy is a big deal. So what does that mean? What percentage of the people that are living in a condo complex actually own it as their primary home? Now, on the beach, obviously that's going to be very small because There are, I think, 5,000 people that live in Ocean City over the winter and 350,000 that are there during the summer. So the numbers are just not going to be there for occupancy. But what I ran into in Arizona is that there are actually 3, not 2 ways to occupy a home. So there's the primary residence, and I want to say maybe 30 or 40 are primary residents of the 180 that are in this condo complex. But then I thought, okay, well, the way that I had calculated was I went online and I looked at the ones that have registered as rentals, and I saw that it was only a third rentals. So it was about 67, 68% owner occupied, I thought. But what I learned was that just because it's not a rental doesn't mean it's automatically their primary home. And what I found was that there's this middle ground where people get kind of clever. In Arizona, they have snowbirds. So a snowbird is someone who lives somewhere else during the summer and then comes in the winter to their condo for maybe 2 or 3 months, maybe longer than that. And what I found was that the middle group, so you've got a third that are renters, pure renters. You've got a sixth that are primary, and then the rest are either snowbirds or they do something really clever, which is they rent to their kids. So they're a parent who owns the home and someone in the family is in it, but they're renting to their kids because the way that they've set up their LLC, it works out favorably tax-wise or something like that. So in terms of my own, thinking like, well, is this a good place to be if only 30 of the 180, homes are primary? What it means is that, only about a third are renting, but those snowbirds are not using the place for 9 months of the year. That means that there's not a lot of wear and tear on the complex. That means that there's people that certainly care about it and it's going to be their primary home for 3 or 4 months of the year, but it's not their primary. So they're going to care about it like their own house, but they're not necessarily going to live there year round. But that was just something I ran into, and I found that putting 25% down gave me a tremendous bump in the rate, getting it down even lower. When it comes to buying a condo, if you can buy it as your primary to start, that's a real advantage because you'll always get the lowest interest rate when you buy primary versus vacation home versus rental. So that's kind of part 2, which is the financing and leverage and kind of what do you want to put down on something like that. You'll get the most leverage from 5% down if you can get away with it. But with a condo, it would be very difficult to do because it's very tough to get a mortgage on something like that. And it depends on credit scores and all those things, but I don't want to belabor that. Let's talk about rentability. So 1 bedroom versus 2 versus 3. I've moved up to a 3-bedroom because I think that's the most rentable. When you have a condo, you're not only competing with other condos for rent, you're also competing with other apartments for rent. And apartments can say, okay, you get a month free. All right, well, as a condo owner, can you afford to give a month free? Can you afford to give 2 months free? Can you afford to say, I'll take a 9-month lease so you don't have to rent in the summer in a college town like I might have to? So those types of things are the things that you want to really think about. But my recommendation, try to get as many bedrooms as you possibly can. You'll notice that as you're going up, you're not going to be tripling as much to get a 1-bedroom to a 3-bedroom. But you'll find that not only are the rents a little bit better for the 3-bedroom, but those are the first ones people are going to look at. They're like, man, I'd really love to have a 3-bedroom over a 2-bedroom, and certainly a 3-bedroom over a 1-bedroom. HOA fees. So be careful. The HOA, has a fee, and I think it's $200 a month for the place that I'm getting. And the big thing to note is that there are also what are called capital improvements. So a capital improvement would be like, we need to replace the roofs on all of the condos. We need to replace the asphalt on the entire condo complex. And you have to pay for that as part of the association. And that can be a larger expense, $400, $500, maybe $1,000 one time. But those come and go from time to time. Things like, the pool, gating it, I'm sure would have been one of those kind of expenses. So also watch out for that there are going to be other expenses above the HOA fee. It's not just like, okay, that's going to be it. And then the HOA fee can go up or down. So where I'm going, $200 a month, it seems reasonable. We've got a lot of units, 180 units. But down the street from where I am in Iowa, there's a condo complex that they're building. Not a condo, but it's actually townhomes. And because they've built the next section, now they have more people in the association, and they actually lowered the condo association rate. And why would you do that? Well, the association does the best for their the people that are there. And if you are on the board, you're obviously going to vote for having lower association fees if you don't need to pay as much, because it's easier to take care of, or cheaper to take care of per unit, 100 units than it is to take care of 20 and so forth. So, and then the last thing is rentability. You want to read the condo docs. Just up the street from me here in Iowa, there's a group of condos that are beautiful. And I thought, wow, I could buy one of those, and it'd be great if my parents could be here from time to time and they could have one of those, and then I could rent it out the rest of the year or something like that. But what I found out is that it must be 95% owner occupied. What that means is that only one condo at a time can be up for rent. And that seems pretty harsh, but it's in an R1 neighborhood, which means that an R1 means you can have one home per unit. And I think they got a variance for that particular condo complex because they put this very high owner occupancy rate. But it basically means that you can't rent it. You have to live in it. And that would be an absolute shock to somebody who's buying the condo with the hopes of renting it out as an investment, and then come to find out that all you've done is just create this additional expense. So there are a lot of things to look at, and one of the things you definitely want to look at, especially with somebody that knows this stuff, are the HOA docs. So those 5 things, I've given you some examples of condos and purchases. I've given you examples of financing and leveraging that you may need to put 20-25% down to get the best rate now. Volatility, know that the condos are the most volatile and are have the most competition for renting because of the apartments. HOA fees can go beyond HOA fees to capital improvements. They may go up, they may go down, but if you can be on the HOA board, you definitely want to. That way you always know what's going on. And then you may not be able to rent it. So make sure that if you are buying a condo to rent it, you're not just taking the word of the agent that's selling it, but you've actually read the docs, you've seen the owner occupancy requirements, and you know that it's the intention of other people in the association to also rent, and that it's not some place that they're trying to make into generally primary. So this is the first episode of real estate kind of investing and just telling you what I've gone through. Next time I'll talk a little bit about townhomes and the things that I looked for in deciding whether to rent or buy, where to rent, where to buy, and some of that advice. But I think as a pharmacy leader, sometimes it's important to make sure that you have your financial house in order so that you can make sure that you can spend as much time doing the things that you want to do at work. Talk to you guys on Wednesday.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.